a code red for humanity. Curb emissions and dramatically reduce consumption or face a world that is fundamentally different.
When Kermit the Frog sang, "It's not easy being green," I want you to know that he was wrong. He was wrong.
There is no planet B. There is no planet blah. Blah, 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 blah.
It is unequivocal that human activities are responsible for climate change.
If unprecedented changes are not made and made soon, there will be irreversible damage to the planet.
Zero Carbon
East Talk.
Hello and welcome to Zero Carbonista, Series 3, The Sky's the Limit. I'm Ian Collins of The New Biz. This is the only podcast of its kind that will give you the real lowdown on all the major environmental stories alongside some honest and qualified opinion. Many try this. Few have succeeded, I have to say. Our man in the hot seat for each episode is Dale Vince. Dale is an entrepreneur and environmentalist. He's built a huge success in the green energy sector. He's the owner of Ecotricity. For the uninitiated, that's the world's first green energy company. He's also the owner of Forest Green Rovers. Morning, Dale.
Yeah, morning, Ian. And now I'm, of course, the new friend of Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, what's going on here? Are you and Vlad been texting or something?
Well, thing is, he intervened in Europe's energy crisis verbally this week. It was yesterday, in fact. Prices went crazy. I mean, even compared to the new crazy, they went crazy. And he intervened in the debate and said, look, he was willing to supply more gas to Europe, and everything cooled off, dropped 40%, that kind of stuff, which shows you that what's driving this market is fear and sentiment, not actual production, supply and demand. But anyway, the point he made, which I repeated on radio and TV, because I think it's a really important point. He said Europe have created their own problems here because they've turned away from long-term gas contracts. And long-term gas contracts are the same thing as energy companies hedging their power, buying it forwards. And the reason for all the failures in the market, one of the big reasons, is a lack of forward buying. So what he's saying is Europe don't buy forwards anymore. Europe prefers to buy on the spot market, which is like the pinnacle of free enterprise and capitalism. The price changes every minute of every day. And of course, capitalists love that, and energy traders love that. The volatility is where they make their money. And Putin just made a very sensible point. If you bought your energy under long-term contracts, you would have price stability. So I repeated that, and suddenly it's like, yeah, what's happening? You're Putin's friend, and this kind of stuff, which is amusing. But actually, the most amusing source it came from was from our local Green candidate to be MP, and we've been having a little chat on Twitter about it. I'm like, it doesn't matter that it came from Vladimir Putin. You've got to look at what he said. What he said is actually the truth. Yeah. And if you blind yourself with prejudice because you don't like the man, then you're missing something, because what he said is the truth.
I was trying to Google Dale Vince and Vladimir Putin, and then clicked on images to see if there was you two horse riding together. When he did his topless horse riding, I thought there might be one of Dale there doing the same thing, or maybe having a picnic or something.
I did an interview once at Forest Green with Russian TV, and they were bemused by the whole vegan thing. And I did offer to send a Q pie to Vlad, and they weren't much impressed, actually.
Yeah, I've got a feeling if you send food to Vlad, it probably gets intercepted quite quickly.
It may well. It may well.
Britain and the US don't want a safe and healthy environment to be a human right. Did you see this story?
I haven't seen that one. No, do tell.
I mean, when you read the headline to something like this, you think, hang on a second, they don't want a right to a clean environment to be a human right. This is Britain and the US are among a few countries withholding support for a proposal brought in at the United Nations that would recognize access to a safe and healthy environment as a human right. And they've said they're not really into putting that on the bullet point list of what is a human right.
Got it. Well, look, I'm not surprised to hear that Britain takes that stance, because the whole post-Brexit thing is about cutting down on environment regulations. The Tory conference this week, there was a lot of talk about basically killing off the Human Rights Act and that kind of stuff. So I'm entirely not surprised that Britain is in that camp. I am surprised that the US is, with Biden now at the helm, but hey-ho.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Unless there's kind of legal ramifications with sticking that into law, I don't know how vulnerable that would make a state if you could sue the government for not being safe and healthy, then, we could all sue them, couldn't we?
Yeah, no, I mean, this will be why they don't want it in law, because there are always legal ramifications when you make a law and then don't stick to it. And they will be afraid of being sued. And, again, going back to the Tory conference, it was really instructive to hear so many people arguing that the law in our country is being abused. They want to kill off the right to a judicial review, for example, because they claim that people are trying to use the law to usurp Parliament, which is, really deeply ironic and fatuous when, in fact, the courts merely uphold the law. Parliament makes the law, and if Parliament finds itself on the wrong side of the law, that's Parliament's fault, not the lawyers, or government rather than Parliament. But this seems to be a theme anyway right now with our government and the Conservative Party, is that the law is out of control because it's actually controlling them. And, we've got to drop environment regulations now that we're out of Europe, change the Human Rights Act, drop judicial reviews, all that kind of stuff. This is what Brexit is really all about.
Yeah. And apparently there's too many white men discussing climate change.
In which case we have to stop right now, Ian.
Yeah.
Or we're adding fuel to the fire.
Well, indeed, yes, that's true. We're doing nothing to address this headline. A worrying lack of diversity in climate change decision-making, policy experts have warned after a study found the voices of people of colour make up just 3% of discussion on the issue.
Wow. Yeah, okay. A bit shocking.
I don't know what you do about that other than try and get more people involved in the debate, regardless of colour, I would have thought.
Yeah. We can't stop talking about it because we're white. Anyway, I'm gonna claim to be quarter gypsy. So
there you go.
There you go.
Nothing wrong with that. This from Gwen on Twitter. Will the government step in and keep our energy bills artificially low? Says Gwen.
They have. And that's the most mad thing that they've done. This is the King Canute-like pose that they've adopted since the start of this crisis. They're saying, we'll protect consumers. We won't let energy prices rise. But the fact is, energy prices coming into our country have gone up 5-fold. And they're being inconsistent because when the fertilizer factory up north shut down because they couldn't afford gas, it made them uneconomic. The government stepped in with an untold number of millions of pounds, they won't say how much, to reopen the factory, and then told them to put their prices up. And this week, they told industry that were complaining they would have to also shut down other industry. They said, that's fine, just put your prices up, which is mad because they're saying to energy companies, you cannot put your prices up. And so 12 have gone bankrupt already. There will be another 12 this winter for sure, unless the government drops the ideology and the political posturing of saying, don't worry, we'll protect consumers, because they can't. We pay one way or the other, disruption, bankruptcy, stranded customers, it all costs and it gets paid by the taxpayer, which is us, energy bill payers, one way or the other.
Do you have to, has Ecotricity had to hoover up customers that were elsewhere? Is that how it works?
No, and we're avoiding those auctions that Ofgem runs. Every time somebody goes bankrupt, they look for the best bid, which usually means who's going to take on the most debt and leave the least behind. It's an odd kind of auction, but we're avoiding those. We have had a few blips of customers joining us, mostly when I'm on the radio and stuff, talking about the energy crisis, but it's more or less background levels, so that's fine.
On that point, Tom says, you're constantly on my TV and radio in 2021 now. It's not a criticism, by the way. He says, why weren't they listening to you a decade ago?
That's a fair question. I was chatting on the radio yesterday, actually, or last night, LBC it was, just talking about the fact that we haven't had a coherent energy policy for probably 20 years. And all of the problems that we're facing right now, the kind of structural problems that we have in the energy market, they were around 20 years ago. We could see them coming, aging nuclear fleet, that kind of stuff, depleting North Sea. But we've just done nothing about it. And we still don't actually have an energy policy. Boris Johnson did launch something new this week at the Tory Party conference. What was it? It was 100% green electricity on the grid by 2035, which sounds pretty fab. I think it could be done by 2030 and needs to be, but 2035, I'm not going to quibble with that, actually. But it does include 2 nuclear power stations, two new ones.
Which you will quibble with.
Which I will quibble with, yeah. I think you'll be lucky if you can get new nuclear on the grid by 2035 anyway. And, of course, the cost is enormous. It's like, I don't know, nearly 3 times the normal market price for energy, or renewable energy, in fact, which is still falling in price. And so new nuclear locks in kind of energy crisis levels of pricing onto our energy bills, so it compounds the cost of energy problem. It won't come in time. I mean, 15 years from now, it's too late, But apart from that, he launched a new plan. I don't think it amounts to an energy policy, but it is a stab in the right direction.
Did you go? Because you were penciled in to try and go to the Tory conference, weren't you? Did you go? Did you get in?
Yeah, well, I was always going to go, even though I had my pass cancelled. But in the meantime,
who cancels Dale Vince's pass?
Yeah, a very sensitive Tory party, it would appear.
Pumps are running the place over there. Let's cancel the energy man, the green energy man's pass. That's a good look.
It's mad, isn't it? So the guys at the Express said, let's go to the Tory party conference, come and join us. Obviously, we've been working together on the Green Britain campaign all year. And get a media pass and join the team. So we applied online, got the pass, everything was fine. 2 days later, get an email from somebody at the organising committee or whatever, I don't know, saying, oh, Dale Vince is actually there in of Ecotricity. He's not a journalist, he can't come. And it's like, well, wow, I've been writing for the Express all year. Nearly 40 articles on sustainability and stuff.
Sure.
I mean, I'm not claiming that I have a career as a journalist, but I think I probably qualifies to be a media person. But then the editor of the Express wrote to them to say, look, he's one of us, he works for us, give him a pass. But they would not relent. In the end, they gave me a pass as an exhibitor for the Daily Express, which is a bit amusing, as I told them when I picked it up, because the Express weren't exhibiting. They didn't have a stand, but I was an exhibitor for the Daily Express, which is.
I love the idea of you showing up in a van with charts and things in the back and a little stage setup that you've got to build just to prove your exhibitor credentials.
Yeah, mad. Yeah, they didn't care about the lack of an exhibit. I think they just want to keep me out of the media briefings, I think, prevent me asking the awkward questions.
But I mean, lots of people go to, it just doesn't take a genius to go, okay, well, this is clearly a legit application. And, I don't know whether there's conspiracy behind it or just bad admin. Probably the latter, but it's not a good look.
No, you know what? I think they're sensitive to criticism. I think it was. I think they didn't want me in the media briefings with the opportunity to ask difficult questions. And if you look at what they did to the Windrush campaigners, 2 of them, they actually prevented them from going in. And they had bought passes as ordinary people to attend a conference. They were asked why they wanted to come in, and they said, "Well, just the same reason as everybody else, to network and meet people and and promote their cause." And they said no, and they wouldn't let them in. I mean, wow, do we live in a democracy?
Well, I was going to say, well, why do you want to come in? Well, because it's the governing party of the day's annual conference. I mean, that might be something that lots of people might want to go to, even if you absolutely bloody hate them. There's nothing wrong with wanting to go to the governing party's conference.
No,
fairly healthy thing to do, I would have thought.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know about healthy, but
in a curious way.
In terms of mental health, it was a very weird experience for me. I honestly felt like I was visiting an alien planet. I got a lot of strange looks, and that was partly due to the way I was dressed, because obviously I wasn't wearing a blue suit and a tie and stuff like that. But it was a genuinely culture shock type experience for me. And then I heard a few speeches and stuff. Took part in an event, or attended an event with the Express for the Common Sense group of Tory MPs and Blue Collar, something like that. Just listening to what they're saying was really interesting. What nobody at the conference talked about was what was happening outside of the room. Fuel shortages, food shortages, worker shortages, the kind of crises that's gripping Britain right now. Wouldn't talk about it. They talked about the great opportunities after Brexit, controlling our own immigration, the big future that Britain has. It was just that, only that. And like they're living in some kind of deluded bubble. They wouldn't talk about what was happening in the country.
It reminded me of like an old Victorian musical, as they introduced each big speaker. There was Pretty, there was Grant, there was Sajid, and then, of course, the big, he's bonkers, he's Boris, and he's here. And you can always hear a man hitting the hammer on the corner as he came on to his clown music, and the place erupted as the big number one turn of the session. Boris Johnson showed up on the stage to entertain, and it was like watching a slightly dodgy stand-up comedian rather than a prime minister.
Yeah, and I think he's become more Trump-like recently, actually, in that he's just passing the responsibility for everything to somebody else. I mean, this week the government blamed the road haulage industry for the lack of drivers and therefore the lack of everything. and I'm incredulous at that they don't run the country.
Yeah, it's the great game, isn't it? And Tories. well, I suppose any party, but in this case, the Tories, they love that, don't they? Love to hear the leader as if he's telling it like it is, and actually, it's often just a crock of shit made up.
It is. It's just, but yeah, I mean, he plays to that audience really well, and it's like there's an unwillingness to accept responsibility for anything, which is very Trump-like, and so far it's working like a coat of Teflon. I mean, nothing's sticking at the moment.
Yeah. Oh, and it puts Labour in a curious place, doesn't it? Because, if you look at how these things, I debate it with our listeners on the radio. I mean, Keir Starmer gave a very sort of fairly downbeat speech. It didn't really light anything up. And Johnson comes along like this bull in a china shop. And, if nothing else, he gets full house points for energy and he gets full house points for positivity. The fact that there's no substance in there, which should be the most concerning thing, is almost irrelevant because he gives off a feeling.
Yeah, it's like politics has become a show, the art of talking rather than the art of doing.
Curious. Naomi actually says on Facebook, did the Tories turn you on? Are you now a donor?
Oh, I think it said turn me, not turn me on. I did read that one. I hope it said what I read it to be.
Well, I mean, politically turn you on.
No,
but you're not a donor.
I'm not a donor, no. I'm not a donor. I'm glad I went. It was a very interesting experience. And I had some interesting chats and there were some decent people there. I bumped into, oddly enough, a few people that I knew from like South Gloucestershire, where we've got a wind farm.
Yeah.
And I met an ex-Tory MP from Stroud and the current Tory MP. And that was a bit of a surprise. But no, I'm not a donor. I haven't become a Tory, but I want to engage with them. That was really what I was there for. I was hoping for the chance to talk about green gas, and it did come up in the event that I went to. The Express editor brought that up, and the room liked it. The idea that Britain can make its own gas from grass, be independent, that kind of stuff. I mean, it strikes a few Tory chords, I think.
Of course. Here's a great story. Daily meat consumption in the UK has fallen by 17%. In the last decade. Now, it's apparently not happening quick enough to hit certain national targets, but that surprised me it was that high, because if somebody had told me it had gone up, I wouldn't have been surprised.
Yeah, that is interesting. But, I think it said 17 grams a day. I looked for the 17%, couldn't find it. Because there's a study that I read, or not a study, but an article just a few days ago that said 30% in a decade.
It recommends that meat consumption in the UK should fall by 30% over the next decade.
Oh, no, different thing. In the last decade, it has fallen by 30%. I see the National Food Strategy say it should fall by 30% in the next 10 years, which is brilliant. And it kind of tees into our green gas story from last week, which is rumbling on, which I'm glad for. There's a lot of questions around, is there enough land? Can we really grow enough grass to do this? And how big are the impact actually on our diets? And what we need to see in order to make room for enough grass to heat all of Britain's homes is a 1% reduction in red meat consumption every year for 10 years, which sits very comfortably under the target of 30% from the National Food Strategy. Yeah. So I like that. It just means that it's a really sensible plan. It fits within the direction of travel that we have to take anyway.
This one from Paul. What's your prediction for the big game with Swindon this weekend?
I predict fun.
I think we said 5-0 for a second. I don't know why.
No, fun. Big crowd, great atmosphere. We've got something quite new that we're going to unveil at the game.
Okay.
And Will forbids me from saying more than that. But that's going to be fun. It's televised on Sky as well, which always adds to a bit of atmosphere. And
nice.
I think we'll win. But look, I think it'll be a tough game. I think I want us to win. That's probably what I really mean. I think it'll be a tough game. Swindon are a good team, but we are also a good team, and we are top of the league.
I was going to say, I think there would be panic over there at Swindon on this one. Well, panic would be the wrong word, but probably the right word. Actually, now I think about it, I think they're bothered by you guys.
I hope so. We like Swindon. I like Swindon. They're good people over there. We tried to get them in an electric coach for the day to travel to us, because it's not a long journey, and we found some electric coaches in London, and we felt it'd be a great thing to do. They could have been the first football team in the world to travel to an away game by an electric bus. They didn't want to do it. It was a bit short notice. And I think I understand usually there would be a fear of disrupting the normal routine and stuff and having an impact on the game. And I think that's probably behind it. But we are instead going to do that ourselves. We're going to travel to an away game in an electric coach in the next couple of months.
Fantastic. Final one here, Google and YouTube cracking down on climate denial. I was kind of surprised they hadn't done that already, because there's been a lot of, these companies have been in the headlines for not cracking down on misinformation, certainly around COVID and things like that. And, they claim they're doing it, and some say they are, and therefore it's curtailing free speech. And others say they're not doing anything at all. But it's interesting that climate hasn't really found itself in that particular debate until now.
Yeah, it needs to be done as well. We started a project a few months ago along with Rob Del Naya, creative director at Forest Green and friend. I had the idea that we could try to use bots to target the climate denial bots themselves, create an eco-bot army. And we've been pursuing that for a few months. It's morphed into something slightly different, and we're going to launch it just ahead of COP. But it's all about this space, the online space, and the kind of the abuse of it, I would say, by commercial interests.
Good work. Dale, that's it for this episode.
Oh,
have a good. It has gone quick, hasn't it? Yeah, and it was longer than normal as well. Have a good week. We'll speak next week.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. See you later.
Cheers, Dale. And that's it for this episode. Don't forget to follow this podcast from your podcast provider so that you get each new episode automatically. Leave a review there too. And make sure you follow Dale on social media, twitter.com/DaleVince, facebook.com/DaleVince. We'll speak to you next week.
Zero Carbon
East On.